your operations team, your sales team says you're winning, but your bank account says that's not happening. Now, many founders are growing their way into a valuation graveyard because their sales team, their operations team, customer service, even marketing is disconnected from the actual cost and delivery of the product. I'm Doug C. Brown, and today Mike Sibley, James Moore and Company reveals how a simple $400,000 efficiency leak, the kind that's plain sight, if you will, in your P&L, is actually stripping out millions of dollars off your exit price. Let's stop the rot. Let's go talk to Mike right now. This is the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Hey, Mike, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Doug. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, so am I. Let's jump right in let's talk about your specialty, really, which is connecting the numbers, connecting the dots to the sales and operational process. And let's finding that hiding EBITDA, the hiding cash that's sitting there. I love what you and I were talking a little bit before about how you're always integrating sales and operations teams and getting operations done to sales and sales to understand operations. I find that's a huge drop in a company for their profitability, frankly, and in their revenue as well. Care to expound upon that one?
Yeah, I think, let's think about it. Even in the smallest companies, it doesn't matter really how large or small you are. It's easy to drop into the silos of functional areas. Sales, and I'll pick on them for just a second. Sales goes out and the perception is they're just trying to get a deal. It doesn't matter the margins. It doesn't matter, the terms. They're just trying to get those deals. That's kind of the operations side thinking, oh, these guys are just trying to send stuff, in and get their commissions, whatever, and meet their quotas. On the operations side, you get the sales teams thinking, oh, these operations people, they can't get product out the door. The lead times are growing. We don't understand what's going on. There's a lot of just miscommunications or misunderstandings. And really, when you start thinking about a process, you look at value streams, you look at that. Forget about departments. Let's all get in a room and really have everybody understand what's the goal here. The goal of the company is, of course, if you've all read the book, The Goal, to make money, right? How do we produce value through that? And how do we get on the same page with what drives value? What are the products that make money? What are our margins? Do we even understand what our margins are? And how does the sales team impact margins? How does the operations team impact margins? And I look at the sales group as they're really setting the pace for what's coming in. They know what customers want, or they should know what customers want. They're on the leading edge of product issues, product development. But oftentimes they're disconnected from what does it actually cost us to make this. On the operations side, believe it or not, I spent a lot of time training both groups. We work with leadership teams to get them all on the same page. Even the operations group, they lack an understanding of what does it really make to cost to build this product? What is our cost, and how can we impact those costs? So to your point, there's so much profit leak throughout an organization, and it starts right at the very, very beginning with the sales process until it's collected, till the revenue's collected and your receivables. There's profit leak all the way through.
Yeah, I think if we could get salespeople to recognize that a deal's not closed till the money's in the bank, it would be a heck of a lot more efficient, right? And certainly more effective. I come from the sales world, right? So like I'm near and dear to supporting salespeople. It's a difficult job, really, when it comes down to it. Constant rejection, stress, quotas, all of that stuff. And then one of the worst things that happens for a salesperson is they write the order and then it gets stuck in the operational process. Like, right. I remember I submitted one time 6 orders, and this was back before electronic orders, and I sent all the folders in, and someone from operations wasn't paying attention, knocked all 6 of them behind a fax machine, the copy machine. No. And 6 weeks later, no installation. One of those companies was Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Wow.
Another one of those companies was an internet startup company. These were like sizable deals. This was like almost $50,000 in commission to me
Mhm.
from this. And some of the companies, Enterprise did not, but others actually canceled, right? I lost about $25,000 in commissions.
Mhm.
I was not a happy guy. But now that I own companies, I look at that as a CEO, I'd be not a happy guy either because we just didn't lose the initial sale. We lost repeat sales, increased
Mhm.
transactional value, new relationships, i.e., referrals and things that spawn out of existing relationships.
Mhm.
So, and then on the operational side, they don't understand a lot of times what salespeople go through. And operations
Right.
has, I think, a better understanding than sales has of operations more so.
Mhm.
Are you finding the same?
Yeah, I think, you know, I agree with you that operations oftentimes do not understand the difficulty sales has to go through. And, I definitely think, but I think that comes back. So I'll take my fractional CFO role that I often play. So I'm not in technically in operations, production operations, or in sales. So I can pick on both teams and both sides of it. And
Right.
I do think that, when you get in a room and you start talking through those things, you realize there's a lot of misunderstandings going both ways. And so, to your point, if you've got those misses happening on the operational side, it really comes back down to the value stream and how are we moving this through our system? And clearly there was a disconnect there. And I say this all the time, there's all sorts of disconnects throughout the systems, and that allows these things to happen. If I was a CEO, that transparency and that flow through. That's why you see, tools like a PSYOP. PSYOPs are really great tools for connecting sales and operations together.
Yep.
And then you mix that in with KPIs. So if when I say PSYOP, in case anybody isn't, that's sales, inventory, and operations. And it's a planning tool that takes sales forecasting or sales orders, and it takes our operations team and our sales team, really puts them together and makes sure we have all the resources in the right place. And it's a great planning tool. A lot of successful manufacturers use some variation of that to make sure that exactly what you just said doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it's not like, so it is sales and ops, but it's also marketing and customer service on
It
the
is.
back end, right? There's these
Mm-hmm.
disconnects all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And what CEOs don't, I think they conceptually get it, but they don't really understand the application of this. If we're losing a couple of points here, a couple of points there, a couple of points here, 5 points there, 6 points there, 2 points there, and it happens at 11 things along the path, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
that could be a huge number,
Right. Well,
right?
and here's, I just had this recently where we watched, we engaged with a new client. We watched over the course as we started looking at their financials, we watched as their margins started dipping down. And, we were fortunate being new, it's kind of like a fresh set of eyes. So we dug
Right.
into product margins. And what we were able to see is as they had a different product line starting to grow in sales. Well, what they didn't know is that the margins, the material costs in those were much higher than they thought they were as a percent, and their margins were dipping. And so we were able to show them that. So, when you start looking at the first place, one of the first places I start when I come into a company is I get their financial statements, but then I go to show me your product margin report
Mm,
if you have one.
yeah.
Okay. So, but that's where we've tried to build is I want to see what are your margins as we get down to the product level. And here's the second thing that I do. I take that margin report and say, does it agree to your financial statements? And I'll give you a good example. So a couple of years ago, I started working with a client and they showed me their product margin report. They were all proud of it and everything. Showed 54, 55% margins. I went to their financial statements. Their financial statements showed 37% margins.
Oops.
So the controller at the time didn't really know how to connect the data to what's happened. That was their operations report. Their operations report said we're doing great, but it didn't match their financials. And what it showed was they had all sorts of allocation problems, costing problems, inventory issuance problems. And so what we've been doing is actually taking that and bringing it together. But by doing that, we saw their margins rise from 37% to well over 40% in a short period of time, just as we started building in financial discipline. So it's identifying where are my issues and then driving backwards to find where those issues are.
Yeah, because increasing revenue at a loss isn't very smart unless it's a planned process. Like,
Right.
um,
Right.
I once talked to a company that I said, tell me what your numbers are, just like you had said. I just top line. They go, well, we're $1 billion company, and I go, I know that, right? I said, well, where are you at after the $1 billion? And they're like, we're $1 billion company, and I'm like, okay, how much are you losing, right?
Yeah, right.
It was like
Yeah.
72 million a year, right? They were losing on $1 billion. And it's not just and folks, those of you who are listening going, oh no, right? These are all resolvable issues. but there's this happens, I would say, in almost every company I've ever looked at. There are hidden places that either revenue, EBITDA, profit, whatever we want to call it at the end, is just sitting there smiling for years. And so if you were advising a CEO, Mike, because, like I have story after story, like marketing
Yeah,
is one of my
I
pet
got
peeves,
tons of
right?
stories.
Like,
Yeah.
I have a client right now, they're starting to creep back up. But when I look at their marketing, they're generating literally like thousands and thousands of unqualified leads and trying to pass those to their sales team. And they're like, why are our close rates so low? I'm like,
Yeah.
right? It's
Right.
because you think you got a name and an email and a phone number, and that's a qualified client. It's, to talk to a sales ready lead. It's not, right? So, so they're spending out a tremendous amount on labor where they don't need to in this
Right.
case. So that's just one example of how I found on the front end, and I'm sure there's lots of examples you have. So where does a CEO or, the founder, let's say it's a founder-led company, they don't call themselves the CEO. Where do they start with this process from your perspective?
Okay. Yeah. So, I always start with the top level of, okay, where are we going? What's the goal that we're trying to achieve here? And, and I don't just mean, hey, let's make money. Yeah, that's a given. We want to make money, but are we looking to sell the company, grow the company for 5 years, 10 years? What are we looking to do? Short term, long term? Because if it's a short term play, there's triggers if you got a little longer play, then we've got some other triggers that we can pull. So we can understand where's the business going. And then we're going to start diving down into, okay, what are the financial statements telling us? What's your strategic plan, if you have one? Tell us. And then how do we start focusing on what I call value drivers, the things that drive value in a business? And we start talking about things like sales growth, diversification of customers. You get into stickiness of customers, things of that nature on the sales side of things. We look at, okay, what are our margins? How are our margins growing? And if they're not, why not? Are they too low? How do we benchmark those margins and understand where you should be? What's killing that? And you start talking about what kills margins. A process just to identify material price changes over time. I can't tell you how many clients I've seen where they don't adjust their pricing at all while their raw material prices are increasing.
Yep.
They don't even know what their landed cost is sometimes.
Yep.
And all it takes is a little bit of a miss there, and it eats into your margins. And I think one of the things is profit leak doesn't just show up as big time changes on your financial statements. It can be an erosion over time. So we really want to understand top level margins and then EBITDA. And one of the places that I often start with clients is I do a sort of a financial statement course. It's a really short few hours where I spend with their operational and sales leaders, not finance, but operational. Finances, they can come and attend because they're going to help me with the linking. but we teach them how to read what a balance sheet means. What does working capital mean? What does a P&L? What does EBITDA even mean? How do we get to margins? In other words, what is the cost of inventory? We talk about materials, labor, overhead. What does that even mean? And then we get into how can we impact that? And I do an airplane exercise where it starts with a really bad process and goes to a really good process. And as we're going through that, I drill the team so they understand the changes we're making. Is it positive to margins or negative to margins? And if it's positive to margins, what does that mean to EBITDA? So really get them thinking about changes that they can make. And inevitably, people walk away and come back with all sorts of ideas of just little profit leak, $10,000 a month here, $15,000 a month there. Next thing you know, you're seeing your overhead rates decrease. Your overhead rates decrease, your margins increase. So it's really walking through those value drivers to say, where are we weakest? Where are we strong? Okay, let's keep building on the strength. Where are we weakest? And let's shore those up as part of a strategy to build the company.
Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me. I mean, we're working with a construction company right now, and margins have been eroding over time. Their labor costs have been going up, and they haven't even been paying attention to it because they're doing a lot of outsourcing to different 1099, independent people. And when I saw it in the P&L, I just looked at the P&L. I'm like, oh my gosh, your labor's killing you, right, on this side.
Right.
But it's one of those things that I love what you said, because if we can get everybody in the company that knowledge, if they're thinking like a business owner,
Yes.
right? That in itself, and I think that's the first place that all companies could start. Reach out to you, and you got a course on this, right? It's one of these places that all business owners, if they got their people thinking like a business owner, their people would make better decisions for the company. They would realize that even though they get paid commission, let's say in sales, they still have maybe a base salary. They're actually an expense to the company. They don't sell anything.
Right.
Or they don't sell enough.
Right. Well, and you think about it, if you're an advocate for the sales team, and I'm an advocate for the sales team too. Like I said, they set the pace for the company. But if the sales team doesn't know which products are your best margin products, if they just think it's all the same, then they're at a disadvantage. If they don't understand the complexities maybe of getting through operations, maybe they don't understand the working capital cycle. Some companies have a really long, when I talk about working capital cycle, think about it as a company, as a manufacturer, you have to buy materials, pay people, build the product, ship the product, invoice the product, wait 30, 45, 60, 90 days to collect. You could be anywhere from 30 days to 6 months in a time frame from the time you spent money on this product to the time you collect. Well, something's got to fund that. And the better your margins are, and the better your cash flow monitoring and processes, and that's a whole different discussion about cash flow and it's a great discussion. It's where I spend one of the largest amounts of my time in the beginning is making sure we understand cash flow. But giving that information to the sales team is, I think, critical so they understand what's happening. And if I go to you and say, hey, Doug, I need you to raise your price by $1 with no other explanation, you're going to be resistant. You're like, well, I can't. Well, if they understand, hey, well, here's what's happening operationally. Well, we have to deal with tariffs, or this price increase, or this, and this. We can't continue to sell this product profitably if we don't get that extra dollar. And that, I think, helps the salesperson how they have to frame it with their customers.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And if operations, again, understands that, look, we can't let this order sit here for this period of time. This needs to be done in this period of time, because if we elongate that period of time, the company's still paying. So it's affecting the margin of what we're doing, right? The same thing on customer service. I listened to some customer service calls recently, and they're like, somebody's calling, I'm not happy, right? Oh yeah, okay, great. I'd like a refund. Okay, sure. It's like, what? no, no. Like, let's dig in and find if we can save this
Right.
customer, and then maybe, find some places that we can even increase the actual value of that
Hmm.
transaction that happened in the beginning.
Right.
Big
Right.
shout out to GoDaddy. If anybody's ever called GoDaddy's customer service, you cannot leave that phone without buying something else. They're amazing at it, right?
Right. Right.
And so, but if people thought like a business owner,
Mhm.
and, I try to explain it this way, I'd love to get your feedback on this, Mike, is I say, if nothing else, understand that money out minus money in equals something,
Right.
loss, break even, or profit, right?
Right.
And if you can always keep that in your head, then as an employee of the company, we can think, okay, am I money going out right now, or am I
Hmm.
money coming in? Because
Hmm.
if I'm more money going out than coming in, then that equal sign is going to be a negative number,
Right.
right? It's going to be a loss, and so on
Yeah.
and so on. So I always want that number to be a positive number, a positive, upside for the company. And if I think like that, I start to act differently. I,
Sure.
I don't I
Well,
don't
and
hang around the
you,
water cooler. I get back on the.
right, right. Well, and I think that's where you get into, I've been really focused recently on accountability,
Mhm.
and even internally at our firm a few years ago, I helped redesign what our accountability and performance management metrics and systems look like, and I've been talking a lot about that with my clients because it's where you see a lot of fallout and we might have KPIs, we might have processes, we might have expectations, but if there's no accountability, what good is it?
Right.
So that's one side of things is really, and oftentimes I think it's a lack of setting those expectations. And this is Doug, this is what we expect from you, and we're going to hold you accountable. And I heard at a conference somebody or somewhere online, YouTube or somebody say, holding somebody accountable shows you care for them and because you want them to be successful, and I think that's a good thing. So you can be a jerk and hold somebody accountable, or you can as a leader really hold them accountable in a way that says, hey, this is best for the business, this is best for you, this is what we want. But I think you also have to say, sometimes you hear people say, well, what's in it for me? Well, one, to keep you employed, we need to be profitable.
Right.
To invest into the company, to build the company up, we need to be profitable. And here's how you can contribute to that. And I'm still one, I am good with performance. I know sometimes bonuses and perform, those things people are all, I'm okay with setting good expectations and saying this is the base, but if you can help increase by improving value, and here's how you improve value our business, I'm okay with performance sharing on those things.
Yeah, and great CEOs will do that, right? Great owners will do that. I once had a gentleman I was working for, and I said, I think we could do this, and he said, well, I'll pay you $500,000 if you can do that. Oh. And I was like, okay, let's try to do this, right? So,
Right.
but I want to go back to, if they're thinking like a business owner, what's in it
Mhm.
for them? Is there a
Mhm.
business owner, right? And they'll think differently. But I think you struck the almighty, ringing bell, the
Mhm.
accountability piece.
Mhm.
Because I worked with a bunch of gyms, and gyms have very, very, very low. Well, let's put it this way: the gym in January and February is full. By March, it starts to empty out. By April, they're down to like 15%, right? That type of thing.
Right. Mhm.
So it's human nature to not want to go and work out, if you will. Right?
Right.
We all know it's healthy. We all know we should do
Mhm.
it.
Right.
And we hold our children accountable to things like, hey, make sure you brush your teeth, make sure that, you go to school, you study, whatever. But for some reason, when it comes to business, a lot of times I find exactly what you said. There's a lack of accountability. There might be policies and procedures already done,
Mhm. Mhm.
but they're not held accountable to that. And or they'll let, like in the sales team, and this is a bad mistake, folks. You let your
Mhm.
top producers just run rampant. Like they
Mhm.
just like, hey, I'm 40% of the sales, and you just allow
Mhm.
that to happen. And I always say to owners like that, well, why don't we go find some other top producers who are now competing with your 40%, and now that 40% is no longer got the power that you think perceive they have. But even if they do, what ends up happening is when they let that person run rampant, the other parts of the team suffer.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
and so that accountability is so key. I have found that in everything, whether it's working out or, you know,
Mhm.
like, changing your oil in your vehicle, right? I mean, oh no, it's at 7,500 miles. We can go to 10,000. It's not a big deal, right? And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden down the line, your vehicle, not maybe yours, but a vehicle would be, you know, doing its thing, right? And it's like, wait, what do you
Right.
mean it's going to, I have to replace the oil pump and it's going to cost me $1,800, right? It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, but if you changed your oil, that wouldn't have happened, right?
Mhm. Right.
So I guess the question I have on this, Mike, is what can owners do? Like you said, they don't have to be a jerk, but what can they do immediately to start to implement more accountability in the process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, going back to the overview though, when you don't hold people accountable, you're driving the performance of everybody down
Right.
because people see that Joe or John over there, whoever, is performing at baseline or below baseline and nobody's doing everything. So that's okay. The expectation here is we don't need to work that hard or we don't need to meet standards. We don't need to do this. And, so now we're driving the performance of everybody down. The second thing we're doing is those high performers, we are frustrating them and they're going to leave
Hmm.
because they're seeing this. They want to be a high performer. They want to get high performing results and they want to be paid accordingly. And if they can't get that here, you're going to lose them. So
Yep.
those are the risks that you have. So let's set that as kind of the baseline. Now, what one of the things that I'm an advocate for, to turn this around, very first thing, reset expectations. Meet with your team. Make them understand what the expectations are. And if your leaders have people below them, give them training to help understand how to build expectations, how to drive that accountability. Because I don't think you can have first accountability without setting clear expectations, clear competencies for those roles, and then setting the performance measures that go with that role. Then you can hold them accountable. And that's the key thing. Hold them accountable for hitting those things. But holding them accountable doesn't mean, hey, you missed on these three things, so I'm going to fire you. It may be, hey, you're really good at these three things, but I need you to be good at these other two things as well. We're going to give you some training on that. Or maybe we've got somebody else in our organization who's really good at that. They've got capacity. We're going to move that job function over to them because you're
Yep.
buried already. It helps change the whole dynamics of that interaction with those people and how their performance is driven.
You you saying the buried already, we're going to give you help. I think anybody who's running IT who's listening to this is now sending you a gift basket of what, happiness and fruit or whatever, because they're so overrun a lot of times. I have one question. I don't know if this is a fair question, but I
Okay.
kind of find this is kind of average, right?
Okay.
When I, so you do a diagnostic with the levers that you're talking about, and you're finding all these things that are just
Mm-hmm.
sitting in plain sight or
Mm-hmm.
can be found, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I do something similar, on the side. We have about 21 things we look at on standard. I usually find between 15 and 20% at a minimum, kind of like across the board, like revenues leaking out here, EBITDA's to be improved here. Is there kind of I mean, some have been crazy. I mean, I've found,
Mm-hmm.
80 something percent one time, which was insane. But
Mm-hmm.
is there kind of like if somebody wants to engage like Mike and say, hey, kind of what's my ROI on this thing? Like, is there kind of like an average that you sort of find without really digging hard? And then if we dig harder, we find that. May be an unfair question.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it depends on the size. So I had some small businesses, we're talking, $5 million companies that you easily could find, you know, 40, 50, 60. I had a client that was working with at the time. They're $1 million company and didn't realize the impact of this $60,000 lease that they had. And, as I was going through it with them, they didn't need it. And, we talked about ideas about consolidating and stuff like that. And, so in larger companies, easily in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, just working with a company recently where we went through their budget. I was like, I think we can shave 400K right off the bat, and it was really just kind of shifting some mindsets on some things. So it's a broad range, 15 to 20% might be a good starting point. But then there's also here's the other way to look at that is, and I was working with a team who's probably going to sell in a couple of years. They're owned by private equity and going to flip again. And, we were talking, I said, if our goal is a 10 multiple of EBITDA, if we find 100K, that's $1 million of value.
Yeah.
Right. So don't just think of it in terms of, hey, I may have only found 10 grand. If one of my goals is to sell the company at a multiple, whatever your multiple is in your industry, times it by that. If it's 5 times, you just added $50,000 enterprise value. And if you're a small business owner, that's meaningful. As a larger company, if you find you got to think about it, not in terms of that, but the other side of the way to look at it is the opportunity cost. So if I find ways to save costs, there's a good chance I'm increasing capacity. If I can increase capacity, I can add more throughput without adding any additional costs. Yeah. That goes straight to the bottom line outside of direct costs. But, we talk about contribution margin. Now it goes straight to the bottom line if I don't have to increase overhead. And this can apply to any business. This isn't just manufacturing. This is any business. You think about it in these ways.
Yeah, I mean, you just described 400,000. So let's say that we had a company that had a $4 million EBITDA. You look at this, it's 400,000 and there's no cost on that. It's like 4.4 now, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right.
Exactly.
So if they're selling at 5x, so we take 4 million times 5x, there's $20 million, let's say. Mm-hmm. But at 4.4x, that's $22 million. So that increase of $400,000 now is immediate today. Mm-hmm. But if we went to sell that company, that's another $2 million that they're going to get later on. But like you said, the opportunity cost, if we could take that 400,000 now, deploy it, and let's say we up the revenue by $1 million, and I don't know, let's say that drops down. Now we're not at 4.4, but we're at 5, right? Just to make the numbers easy on me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm with you.
So now we're talking, instead of 20 million on the back end, 25 million on the back end. Mm-hmm. So now you've added $5 million, but you also have now roughly $1 million to work with more on the front end. So this is really kind of a stacking process that I see it.
It is. It is. It's why, I'm always confident that when we work with our clients and we get engaged, walking through this stuff, again, we're a clean set of eyes. We've seen a lot of things. And so we can look at it from a different standpoint. Whatever they're paying us, we're going to find improvements. We're going to do those things. Same with you. You're going to find those things, but it's not just, hey, a dollar for dollar. Hey, you spent X amount of money with it and you saved X amount of money. You got to look at multiples. You got to look at opportunity costs. There's a lot of things. So from that standpoint, the ROI is absolutely there.
Yeah. And if we can get some monthly recurring revenue in there, that even pumps up the valuation even more, right?
Recurring revenue is like I said, sticky customers. That's what buyers want to see. When you start getting into the sales process, what does a buyer want to see? They want to see your ability to forecast, how accurate you are in your forecast, your customer base, the stickiness of those customers, the margins of those customers. So they're going to take a really heavy focused approach on customers and margins when they're looking to acquire you, so they can see what you're going to do with that. And if you can open up your operations to be able to take in more sales without increasing those costs, it doesn't matter whether you're a construction business, whether you're a gym, anything. If you can increase revenue without increasing costs, overhead costs, you're going to put more to the bottom line, which is going to increase the value of your business.
And make your life a heck of a lot less stressful, less stressful in the process of doing that, right?
Right.
Because, one of the biggest stressors a lot on anyone who owns a company is, where do I find the money to do this?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so, I know I've been there, right? So,
Right. Well, and that's why you got to, you go back to let's talk about the basic blocking and tackling of business and planning. I'm a big believer in budgeting. I'm a big believer in budgeting CapEx. I'm a big believer in cash flow management. I use a 13-week cash flow with all my clients. I also put together a year-long cash flow forecast. And then we're able to take that and say, okay, where do we see our risk and problems in here? What do we need to grow? What equipment? Is there equipment that's going bad that we have to replace? Is there equipment that we could use that could help grow our business? What does that investment look like? How do we fund that investment? Is the cash flows from the company good enough? Or do we need some outside financing? How do we pay for that? There's a lot of thought processes, but when you put it down on paper and you can look at it big picture, you can make a lot of great decisions about your business.
yeah.
And the
Yeah.
interesting thing about budgeting, and I remember sitting down a few years ago with a client, a CEO ran a successful business, but it wasn't as profitable as it should be. And we sat down with the P&L, detailed P&L, and walked line by line through them. And I explained to him what those lines meant. He's like, well, why are we spending this money on this? So that's a great question. Why are we spending this money on? So by the time we were done, just an hour session, just off the top of his head, there was $10,000 or $15,000 of expenses gone per
Yep.
month, just
Yep.
gone, that we could take out. Really simple exercise to really understand what was going on. It was amazing. It was pretty fun to walk away with kind of that much value out of just an hour meeting.
It's nice to see your face light up because you get I think like this endorphin rush out of what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Right.
It's
Right.
so it's really about improving the effectiveness and the efficiencies of everything on that money in, money out type
Mhm.
process. Um, Mike, what's some way that if somebody's like, okay, you know what, I got to talk to this guy. How do
Mhm.
they get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's easy. They can always email me, mike.sibley@jmco.com. Give us a call, 386-257-4100. And of course, our website, jmco.com. They can easily, they can check out, more about us. And then there's online inquiries that way. So any number of ways to get out. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, those kind of things. So easy to find me, I think.
And folks, his last name is spelled Sibley.
Thank you.
So, well, Mike, I want to thank you so much for being here on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, bringing that, I would say that A+ game. I know there are people that are sitting there going, oh my, and then there are people who are going, wow, I gotta move on this. So, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate being on. I enjoyed the conversation. This was a lot of fun. I can see you're definitely you light up by this same stuff too. So it's fun to have that kind of dynamic conversation. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. If you haven't audited your product level margins in the last 12 months, if you haven't looked at this stuff, you're likely sitting on 15 to 20% in profit leaks in your company. Now, remember, every $100,000 in EBITDA you find today isn't just cash in the bank, although it is, but at a multiple 5x, 10x, let's say it's 10x multiple, that's $1 million increase in what your company is worth. Let's stop guessing if your profitability is there, hiding in plain sight, looking at you, sometimes even laughing at you. And let's start building the cross-department accountability that protects your legacy. Now, you can either head to the show notes and grab Mike Sibley's contact information at James Moore. You can reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. We're going to start to plug that leak. Let's do an assessment on where you are and where you need to go before your valuation drops another 7 figures. I'm Doug C. Brown. This is the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Now let's go out and get your money back, and let's do it in a win-win fashion. Until next time, Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast saying, if you love this episode, please give it a review. I'd be forever grateful to your success.